It's one of the most famous historic sites in England, Hadrian's Wall. The Emperor Hadrian visited Britain, and he was the first to build a wall from sea to sea to separate the Romans from the barbarians.
Beneath a quiet cricket field in Carlisle, something shocking was uncovered. Tyrian purple, the rare dye once worn only by Roman emperors. But that's just the beginning. From massive hidden turrets and oversized sandals to a tombstone carved in 2 languages of love, recent discoveries are rewriting everything we thought we knew about Hadrian's Wall. What if the Romans weren't just building a wall, but planting secrets? Keep watching, because the truth buried in Britain is more unbelievable than fiction. The Carlisle Prophecy, 2017. Beneath a cricket field in Carlisle, just south of Hadrian's Wall, archaeologists in 2017 uncovered something that would challenge every assumption about Rome's northern frontier. For centuries, this ground, located just south of the Great Stone Barrier that stretched 73 miles from Wall's End on the River Tyne to Bowness-on-Solway on the Solway Firth, held a truth that would force us to completely rethink the purpose of Rome's most famous northern frontier. The initial signs were promising. Post holes and clay floors pointed to Roman structures. But as the archaeologists dug deeper, the scale of their discovery became staggering. They weren't just finding a building, they were finding a monumental complex. The foundations were massive, designed to support a structure of immense importance. And then, they found the bathhouse. This was not a simple washing area. It was a sophisticated engineering marvel, complete with hypocaust systems, tiny pillars that held up the floors, allowing hot air to circulate and heat the rooms. This was a place of luxury, a statement of Roman comfort and civilization planted in the damp, cold north. It spoke of wealth and power on a level that didn't match the story of a remote, battle-hardened garrison. Then came the small finds. From the waterlogged ground, dozens of tiny, intricately carved gemstones emerged. These were intaglios, used to seal documents with impressions in wax. Each one was a miniature masterpiece. They depicted gods, emperors, and mythical beasts, carved in stunning detail. These stones had fallen from the rings of their owners, lost in the bathhouse drains as people washed. They were not the property of common legionaries. These were the possessions of wealthy, high-ranking officials, the kind of men who moved in the highest circles of power. The concentration of these stones suggested that this was a place where important business was conducted, where documents were sealed, and where the elite of the empire gathered. But nothing prepared the team for what came next. A small, dense lump of reddish-purple material. Laboratory analysis confirmed it was Tyrian purple, the most valuable substance in the ancient world. This pigment wasn't just a color, it was a symbol of ultimate authority. It was produced from the glands of a specific sea snail, a painstaking process that required thousands of creatures to yield a single gram of dye. Its cost was astronomical. By imperial decree, its use was restricted to the highest echelons of society, most notably for the purple stripe on the togas of senators, and, in its purest form, for the robes of the emperor himself. Finding a raw piece of this pigment in Carlisle was like finding a crown jewel in a border town. It was completely out of place, and that was the point. Its presence was a screaming anomaly in the historical record. This wasn't a trinket that had been traded or lost. This was evidence of direct, top-level imperial presence. It meant that the emperor's court, his inner circle, or perhaps even Hadrian himself, had been here, at the very edge of the empire. The Ouseburn Anomaly, 2021. The story of the wall has always been one of Roman order. We picture them as master planners, laying down a frontier with mathematical precision, every mile castle exactly 1 Roman mile apart, every turret perfectly spaced. For generations, our understanding was built on structures like Turret 25B, also known as Brunton Turret, first excavated by John Clayton back in 1878. These well-preserved ruins, with their standard dimensions and predictable placement, reinforce the image of a machine-like efficiency stamped onto the landscape. But a discovery in the heart of Newcastle would reveal that this was a carefully crafted illusion. The Romans were not the rigid automatons of legend. They were brilliant, flexible tacticians, and they were willing to break their own rules to win. In 2021, during a routine archaeological survey for a new development in the Ouseburn area, engineers stumbled upon a massive anomaly buried just beneath the modern surface. As archaeologists carefully excavated the site, the scale of what they had found began to dawn on them. This was not a small post hole or a fragment of wall. They were uncovering the foundation foundations of a watchtower, known as a turret. But this was like no other turret ever found on Hadrian's Wall. First, there was its sheer size. The foundations were enormous, measuring 10.26 meters wide, making it one of the largest turrets ever uncovered. This was not a standard issue check-the-box watchtower like the well-preserved Brunton turret. This was a heavyweight, a fortress in miniature, built to withstand more than just the weather. It was designated Turret 3A, but the name could not capture its significance. Later construction had destroyed interior floors. But in the narrow strip between the wall and the defensive ditch, archaeologists found 6 shallow pits that once held sharpened wooden stakes, an additional barrier to slow attackers. Then, there was its location, which presented the second and greater mystery. The Romans were famous for their surveying. They liked straight lines and predictable patterns. Yet this colossal turret was not placed at a neat, pre-measured Roman mile. Its position made no sense according to the standard Roman blueprint. Instead, it was deliberately, strategically planted to dominate the deep, wide valley of the Ouseburn River. Its discovery in this urban area to the east of Newcastle was itself a surprise, proving that significant Roman archaeology could survive in a built-up environment. This valley was a natural highway, a perfect invasion route leading straight from the northern wildlands into the heart of Roman territory. The Romans knew that an enemy would use this path, so they threw their rulebook out the window. They built their biggest, toughest turret right at this critical choke point, flanked by the wall's defensive ditch and a line of berm obstacle pits. Its purpose was clear: to project overwhelming force over the entire valley. From its elevated position, soldiers inside would have had a commanding view, spotting any movement for miles. Its very size suggested it held a larger garrison, perhaps equipped with more powerful artillery like ballistae, which were essentially giant crossbows that could hurl heavy bolts at any force approaching from the north. It was not just a lookout post. It was a statement of control over a landscape that defied their love for straight lines. The discovery was announced in September 2022. This single discovery changes how we see the entire frontier. It proves that the wall was not a prefabricated, one-size-fits-all barrier. It was an organic, intelligent system. The Romans arrived with a plan, but they were smart enough to adapt that plan to the reality of the ground. When the terrain and the tactical threat demanded it, they could be incredibly flexible. They respected the land not by conquering its every curve, but by using its features to their own advantage. The Ouseburn Valley was a natural invasion route, and the Romans turned it into a killing ground. Any force attempting this path would be spotted miles away, then subjected to artillery fire from an elevated position they couldn't bypass. The valley wasn't an obstacle to Roman planning. It became their tactical advantage. The Bremenium Hoard. To understand the true scale of Rome's ambition, we must journey north, beyond the stone curtain of Hadrian's Wall, into lands that history books often paint as purely hostile and wild. Here, perched on the very edge of the known world, stood the Fort of Bremenium. This was not just another military base. It was a powerful stronghold, a fist of stone and iron hammered into disputed territory. The very location speaks of constant danger, of a garrison living on a knife's edge. The logical assumption is that life here would be bleak, a harsh existence defined by isolation and conflict. But the ground beneath Bremenium tells a completely different and far more fascinating story. In 2024, archaeologists working at the fort unearthed a collection of artifacts that transformed this narrative of bleak survival into one of surprising prosperity. The 2024 excavations revealed fine Samian pottery, imported from Gaul, glass vessels, intricate metalwork, and personal jewelry. These weren't military supplies. These were luxury goods showing long-distance trade networks reached even this isolated northern fort. The quality of these items was the first clue. This was not locally made roughware. This was fine Samian pottery, imported from Gaul. There were glass vessels and intricate metalwork that spoke of sophisticated tastes and access to luxury goods. This evidence points to one undeniable fact: long-distance trade. Despite its remote and dangerous location, Bremenium was plugged into the vast commercial network of the Roman Empire. Supply chains stretching thousands of miles were delivering the comforts of the Mediterranean to this northern frontier. The soldiers and their families were not cut off from civilization. They were its farthest-reaching fingertips. But the story becomes even more compelling when we look at the personal effects. The jewelry, the decorative brooches, and the everyday items reveal a community that was more than just a garrison. It was a society. Soldiers had brought their families. Children were born here. People fell in love, celebrated, and mourned. The fort was not just a military installation, it was a home. Jewelry discovered at the site shows Celtic spiral patterns combined with Roman manufacturing techniques, physical evidence of cultural fusion. They were not just occupying the land, they were putting down roots and creating a new identity. This rich tapestry of life, woven so far beyond the safety of the main wall, forces a dramatic rethinking of the frontier. The simple story of Romans on one side, barbarians on the other, collapses under the weight of this evidence. The wall was not the end of Roman influence. It was the anchor point for a much wider sphere of control. The empire's power did not stop at a stone line. It projected northward through forts like Bremenium, creating a deep zone of interaction, trade, and cultural exchange. The Magna Mystery. The history of Hadrian's Wall is often told through stone and strategy, through the grand plans of emperors and the massive structures they left behind. But to truly understand the frontier, we must also listen to the whispers of the people who lived there. Sometimes those whispers come from the most unexpected places. In 2025, during a major archaeological investigation at the Fort of Magna, a crucial garrison along the western part of the wall, researchers made a discovery that was both ordinary and extraordinary. It involved no precious metal or inscribed monuments, but something far more intimate: footwear. Dozens of Roman sandals and shoes, preserved for nearly 2 millennia in the damp, airless soil. These were the everyday items of the soldiers and civilians who called this place home, casually lost or discarded over time. But as the 2025 team carefully cataloged these personal effects, a curious and consistent pattern emerged, one that turned a simple collection of leather into a captivating historical puzzle. The key finding from that season was the remarkable size of the artifacts. Many of the sandals recovered were exceptionally large, with some measuring over 11.5 inches in length. To put that into perspective, a sandal of that size would comfortably fit a man standing well over 6 feet tall in today's world. In the Roman era, where average heights were significantly shorter and nutrition was less reliable, such stature would have been noteworthy, even remarkable. A single large sandal could be an anomaly, a coincidence. But the concentration of so many oversized shoes at this single fort is what transforms a simple observation into a compelling mystery. This was not a random assortment of lost property. This pattern suggests the Magna garrison may have included an unusually high number of tall soldiers. This discovery immediately opens a fascinating door to speculation. Was it just a chance that so many tall men ended up serving together, or was it a deliberate military decision? The Roman army was a highly organized and strategic institution, known for assigning specific units to posts based on their particular skills or attributes. Certain troops were renowned for their engineering prowess, others for their skill in cavalry. It is therefore entirely within the realm of possibility that the soldiers stationed at Magna were selected, at least in part, for their physical size. The concentration of oversized footwear at Magna raises the intriguing possibility this wasn't coincidental. Imagine the powerful statement this would make. The frontier was a place of constant negotiation and intimidation. A guard force comprised of men who literally towered over the local population would have been a living, breathing embodiment of Roman power. They were a wall of flesh and bone before an enemy ever reached the stone barrier. Their very presence at the gate of the fort, or on patrol along the wall, would have been a form of psychological warfare. It communicated an unspoken message about the sheer physical might of the empire. It was a calculated display of dominance, written not in official dispatches, but in the impressive physical stature of the troops themselves. The Drumburgh Resurrection. For generations, local historians and archaeologists knew Hadrian's Wall at Drumburgh should be there. Old maps and records hinted at its path, cutting through fields and under modern roads. But on the surface, there was nothing to see. The stone had vanished. It was a ghost, a line on a map that the physical world had seemingly erased. The common belief was that every usable stone had been quarried away over the centuries, looted by farmers and builders to construct walls, barns, and homes. The wall at Drumburgh was considered lost, a part of the frontier that had been dismantled and absorbed back into the landscape, forever beyond recovery. It was a closed chapter. Then, in October 2025, a team of dedicated volunteers decided to challenge that assumption. They were not professional archaeologists, but their passion was fueled by a deep knowledge of the local area and a refusal to believe the wall was completely gone. Their work began not with shovels, but with technology. Using advanced geophysical survey equipment, they scanned the ground, sending pulses of energy into the earth and reading the returning signals. The results showed clear, compelling anomalies, straight lines and right angles that stood out starkly against the natural chaos of the soil. Nature does not build in perfect geometry. These hidden shapes were the ghostly signature of the wall, a digital whisper promising something solid beneath the grass. Guided by this technological map, the team began to dig. The initial work was slow and methodical, moving through layers of topsoil and modern debris. The air was likely filled with a mix of hope and skepticism. How much could truly remain? Then, a trowel scraped against something unyielding. Then another. As they carefully brushed away the dark, packed earth, a shape began to emerge. Not just one stone, but a line of them. Then, another course on top of that, and then another. As they continued their painstaking work, a section of the wall itself began to rise from the ground, as if waking from a long sleep. It stood 4 courses high, a substantial, tangible piece of masonry that had been hidden from the world for centuries. The significance of this discovery cannot be overstated. This was not just about finding a new piece of the wall, this was a resurrection. The stones at Drumburgh were not scattered or broken. They were exactly where Roman engineers had placed them nearly 2,000 years ago, silently waiting. They had survived because they were buried, protected by the very earth that had hidden them. This find was a powerful message from the past. This discovery also served as a dramatic validation for modern archaeological methods. The geophysical survey was proven to be stunningly accurate. The lines on the screen corresponded perfectly with the stones in the ground. This technology is like a new sense for archaeologists, allowing them to see into the earth without making a single cut. The successful resurrection of the Drumburgh section proves that we now have a reliable map to a hidden landscape. It gives researchers the confidence to know where to look, transforming a search of thousands of acres into a targeted excavation. The ground is no longer a secret keeper, it is a readable text. The find at Drumburgh does more than just add another segment to the map. It confirms that the map itself is still incomplete, and that the true scale of the wall continues to reveal itself, piece by buried piece. These discoveries from 2017 to 2025 reveal a pattern. Every assumption about Hadrian's wall as a simple military barrier was wrong. The Tyrian purple at Carlisle proves emperors themselves visited this supposedly remote outpost. The oversized turret at Ouseburn shows tactical brilliance that adapted plans to terrain. The luxury goods at Bremenium demonstrate trade networks extending deep beyond the wall. And Regina's bilingual tombstone, though discovered a century ago, finally makes sense. Syrian merchants married British freedwomen and honored them as equals. Hadrian's wall wasn't keeping cultures apart, it was managing their collision. Behind the stone barrier, the entire Roman Empire converged. Soldiers from North Africa, merchants from Syria, administrators from Gaul, local British tribes, creating a multicultural frontier society more complex than any ancient border before it. The wall didn't mark civilization's end. It marked the beginning of something unprecedented, a meeting place of worlds. The bilingual tombstone. The most powerful evidence wasn't discovered in 2025 or 2017. It was found over a century ago. We simply didn't understand what it was telling us. In one quiet corner near Hadrian's wall, a single voice from 2,000 years speaks with stunning clarity, telling a story so personal it shatters the entire myth of the Roman frontier. This voice belongs to a woman named Regina. Her story is carved in stone, a tombstone at Arbea Roman fort, erected by her grieving husband. But this is no ordinary memorial. At first glance, it looks Roman. The Latin inscription is clear and formal. It tells us her name, Regina, meaning queen. It tells us she was a member of the Catavilauni tribe, a Celtic people from southern Britain. And it reveals a life of dramatic transformation. She was once a slave. A man named Barates, a merchant from the distant city of Palmyra in Syria, owned her. He eventually freed her, and then, in a remarkable turn, married her. The Latin text honors her as his freedwoman and his wife, a testament to a journey from bondage to respectability. But the stone holds a second secret, a second voice. Carved below the impeccable Latin is another inscription, this one in the curling, elegant script of the Palmyrene Aramaic language. It says the same thing, Regina, the freedwoman of Barates, alas. This is the language of Barates' homeland, over 3,000 miles away. In his moment of profound grief, this Syrian man living in the rain-soaked north of Britain reached for the words of his childhood, the language of his heart, to mourn his British wife. This simple bilingual act transforms the stone from a monument into a conversation between two worlds that were never supposed to meet. The implications of this are staggering. First, it reveals the incredible mobility within the Roman Empire. Barates was not a soldier, he was a merchant. He traveled from the shimmering, arid markets of the Middle East to the damp, cool frontier of Britain to make his living. The Roman army was a massive consumer of goods, and where the legions went, traders like Barates followed, creating a network that connected the entire empire. Second, and more importantly, it reveals a social landscape we never knew existed. This was not a simple case of Roman conquerors and British conquerors. Here was a Syrian man who had made a life and a family in Britain. He did not just marry a local woman, he honored her with a grand and expensive monument, a luxury few could afford. This signifies status, success, and integration. It shows that on the frontier, new social structures were forming. A freed Celtic slave could become the respected wife of a successful foreign merchant. Their lives were a mosaic, pieced together from British, Roman, and Syrian cultures. This single tombstone completely dismantles the Romans versus barbarians textbook narrative. The frontier was not a rigid dividing line between us and them. It was a social and economic corridor, a bustling, globalized zone where people from every corner of the known world collided and connected. The army brought the world to Britain, and in its shadow, people like Barates and Regina built a new world together. The existence of this Syrian-British family, thriving and achieving status near the wall, is something the old history books would never have predicted. It proves that the real Great Wall was not the physical barrier of stone and turf. The real wall was the immense, invisible network of people, from Spain, from North Africa, from Gaul, from Syria, who were drawn to this frontier. They built, they traded, they loved, and they died there, creating a complex, multicultural society that should not have existed in a land supposedly defined only by conflict. Regina and Barats stand as eternal proof that the most powerful force on the frontier was not the army, but the human heart. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.